Coming up, CJ McCollum steps up big time for New Orleans and the Milwaukee Bucks raining threes at Madison Square Garden. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA, local experts going over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. The Milwaukee Bucks hit 12 three-pointers in the last quarter and a half in New York to come back from down 17 against the Knicks. Both Locked On Bucks and Knicks recap the final from MSG.
The Bucks escape at Madison Square Garden for the second time this season and pick up a much-needed win. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. And midway through the third quarter, the Bucks are trailing by 17 points, and it looks like there was going to be more soul-searching required for a team that has been scuffling over the previous 9 games. But then Joe Ingles came in, and he executed the offense. He limited the turnovers. He knocked down some outside shots, and that provided the spark for the Bucks to get back into it. Ingles finished with a season-high 17 points, including 5 for 11 shooting from 3. And then Drew Holiday, who could not hit a shot all night, looked completely out of sorts, came up with multiple clutch baskets from the outside to ensure that the Bucks were able to hang on. They're not playing great basketball. There is certainly problems with the offense on this team, but for now, you got to bank the win and get out of there. First game of a 4-game road trip for the Bucks. They'll take it. Check us out on Locked On Bucks.
All of the Locked On Knicks podcast following a 111-107 defeat for the New York Knicks at the hands of the Milwaukee Bucks. This was a game that the Knicks very much could have won, up by as many as 17 in the third quarter. They allowed the previously offensively adept Bucks to drop 38 points in the fourth quarter due to a combination of an utter inability to secure rebounds, an overcommitment to protecting the paint, leading to some absurdly long closeouts. Cough, Evan Fournier, cough. And in turn, wasting a career night from Jalen Brunson, who dropped 44 points and was utterly masterful, going up against two of the best point of attack defenders on earth in Drew Holiday and Javon Carter. Brunson was electric, 15 of 30 from the field, 4 of 10 from 3, a perfect 10 for 10 from the line. But the Knicks' late game woes continue.
The Bulls pushed the Celtics to the limit, but Boston was able to hold off the late charge in the fourth quarter. Locked On Celtics breaks it all down from the TD Garden.
Chicago Bulls made it tough, but the Boston Celtics hold on for a big win at home. I'm John Corrales from the Locked On Celtics podcast here at the TD Garden, where Jayson Tatum's 32 points helped hold off the Bulls in a late run. Surprising run, actually, because I thought the Chicago Bulls on their third game in 4 nights would kind of fold there late in the fourth quarter, and it looked like they might. The Celtics were up by 14, but Zach LaVine just started getting hot from 3, and he's been hot lately, so probably not a big surprise that he finally started hitting some shots. But the Celtics maybe went a little too ISO to finish that fourth quarter, but it was the final stretch where the Celtics started to get some defensive stops and a huge three-pointer from Al Horford. You got Jayson Tatum sharing the ball, and then you got to stop and Jayson Tatum getting out into transition to seal this thing. Same old story for the Celtics. When they play the right way, things go well. When they try to ISO, things don't go so well. Celtics now finish this very short homestand against the New Orleans Pelicans before a back-to-back with the Brooklyn Nets. We'll talk about it on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Coming up, the Grizz get a gritty win at home. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by BetOnline, the #1 spot for all of your online sports betting needs. If you want the latest odds or trends, you can just head over to betonline.net. It's where the game starts. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. The Grizzlies perhaps playing down to their opponent a little bit when they took on the San Antonio Spurs last night, but they adjusted mid-game and got the job done in the end. Locked On Grizzlies goes over the latest win for Memphis.
The Memphis Grizzlies winning streak extended on Monday night over a Spurs team that was very competitive through much of the game. The Grizzlies pulled away late in a contest that Memphis fans should still be optimistic about, even if it was a bit closer at times than perhaps they would have liked. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and sometimes you got to get down in the mud. You got to dig deep a little bit in the muck and pull out a victory. Second night of a back-to-back, even though it was a home-and-home back-to-back, the Grizzlies at times showed some wariness, not exactly the most exquisite game in terms of execution, especially on the defensive end at times, giving up 113 points to the Spurs. Not ideal, but Steven Adams with another double-double, 15 rebounds in this one. Jaren Jackson Jr. with a strong showing. Tyus Jones once again showing how valuable he is to this Grizzlies team as a backup for them, with Ja Morant not playing once again due to a sore leg. The bench had some good signs. Santi Aldama pulled out some stops. It was a good win that you need to get if you're going to stay atop the Western.
The Pelicans are once again playing without Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, but CJ McCollum came through and got a win over Washington for the Pels last night. Locked On Wizards goes over the loss, while Locked On Pelicans thinks McCollum could be All-Star game bound.
What's good, everybody? It's your boy Brandon Scott again from Locked On Wizards. The Washington Wizards lost tonight to the New Orleans Pelicans, 132-112, led by 34 points from CJ McCollum. Now, he picked up the slack for the Pelicans due to Zion Williamson being out for injury and Brandon Ingram. Now, what factors lost this game for the Wizards? Three main factors. One, turnovers. They committed 20 turnovers tonight. Points off turnovers. The Pelicans capitalized, scoring 39 points off the turnovers and points in the paint. 74 points scored by the Pelicans. So anytime you score 74 points in the paint, you win that game. So obviously going forward, this is the first game of a 4-game homestand for the Washington Wizards. So if they hope to get a couple of wins on this road trip, which include opponents like the Golden State Warriors and the Chicago Bulls, they're going to have to show up paint defense and really cut down on turnovers. Thank you again, everybody, for watching, and everybody have a good night.
After putting up 34 points in the Pelicans win over the Wizards, is it time to start talking about CJ McCollum as an all-star? I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast and Locked On NBA. The Pelicans won yet again without Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram, and it was the third member of their big three who got it done. CJ McCollum put up 34 points in an incredibly efficient performance in their win over the Washington Wizards. Despite numerous injuries to key players, the Pelicans have remained at the top of the Western Conference standings, and CJ is a big reason why. Over his past 15 games, he's averaging 26 points, 6 assists, and shooting 50% from three on over 8 attempts per game. If the Pelicans keep winning without Zion and Ingram, and we don't know when those guys are returning just yet, and CJ keeps scoring like he is, don't be surprised if you see him playing in Utah over All-Star Weekend.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Now make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NBA and, of course, your favorite team's Locked On podcast right here on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kanani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.